Alright, hi, I'm Spencer Keralis. I'm the editor and publisher of Laughing Mouse Press, and I'm here today with the Denver Craft Ninjas to teach a basic bookbinding stitch. What we're going to do today is make a little mini personal notebook that you can keep in your handbag or in your desk. And what it's using is a stitch called pamphlet stitch, which is the basic stitch to do any sort of bookbinding project. It's also one of the oldest technologies for bookmaking that there is, and it probably dates to at least the 10th century. But what we're doing today is just these little pocket notebooks and not something fancy like a codex. Your first step is to cut your paper to size. What we're using today is some large grid graph paper for the inside and a pre-cut notebook cover that's done with 80-pound cardstock. This is sort of a basic quilting kit set up with a rotary cutter, a cutting mat, and a straight edge. You can use scissors if you want to, but I find this to be a little bit more efficient and it gives you a nice straight cut. So the first step is to cut your paper to size. I've already cut the cover stock to size, but to do your middle bits, you line it up on the grid and then use your cutting mat as a guide for getting it to the right size. And then just do a smooth, strong stroke away from you and use the ergonomic parts of the rotary cutter to keep it solid and safe. We don't want to lop off any thumbs while we're doing this. Once you get the paper cut to size, the next step is to fold it so that it will be the right size for your book. And what you're doing here by layering these together is creating the signature of your inside pages. And if they don't quite match up exactly right, don't sweat it, because you can always use the rotary cutter to trim it to size. So what you do is just fold it in half, and then to get a nice crisp crease, you use a bone folder to make that sharp crease. And now, since this came out of a notebook pad, it's not quite the right size, not quite even though we measured it. So we can just nip off that edge with our rotary cutter, just like so. Then you want to do the same thing with your cover. And since the cover comes as loose stock, if you measure it exactly 5.5 inches, it will actually be in half. There's a little bit of difference in stuff that comes out of the pad. And again, you just match up your corners and then use your bone folder to make a nice sharp crease. So the next step involves an awl. And awls are extremely sharp, so I like to cover them up with a cork from, looks like this is a Beaujolais Nouveau. And the important thing to remember is that if your cover stock and your inside stock are not quite the same size, that you're measuring from the center, not from a specific number on the ruler. So in this case, we're going to punch a hole at 2 3/4, which is the center of 5.5. And make sure to do it so that the punched side that you're punching from is the good side, so that the part that pokes out and sticks out is on the bad side. And you want to use a dish towel or some other padding to prevent this from going into your table or your cutting mat. You just punch all the way through at the center point. And then for a book this size, you measure about 1 1/4 inches away from the center on either side. And it's not important that this be exact, but what is important is that it be the same on your inside stock and your cover. Because otherwise you'll have to do some cover trimming to make it match up. And so again, from the side that you want to be the outside, the good side, to the bad side, you go at the center point. And then 1 1/4. And 1 1/4. And you'll be able to feel when it punches all the way through. It's important to punch all the way into the girth of the awl so that you have enough room in the hole for your thread. This is unbleached linen bookbinding thread, and the important thing about the thread is remember that it's acid-free. You can use all sorts of different threads for this, like embroidery floss or like hemp thread that you would use for jewelry making, but you should make sure that it's acid-free so that it doesn't damage the paper or stain it over time, especially if you're doing a project like a memory book or a photo album. You'll measure about twice the depth of the book and snip it off. And then you pull out your tapestry needle. We use tapestry needles because they're blunt. This would be the same kind of needle that you would use for like cross stitch, so that it doesn't snag on that special cross stitch fabric. And it's the same reason that we use it for these books, is so that it doesn't snag on the paper. You thread the needle, and then you match up the holes that you just punched on your cover stock and your insides. And then going from the side where you want the final knot to be, you put it through the center hole. And then you pull it all the way through except for a short tail, maybe about 2 inches. And you can trap that down with your thumb. Then go up through the top hole. And then you go all the way down the spine to the bottom hole and back all the way through. Pull it nice and tight, and then you come out again the center hole. Now when you come out the back, you want to make sure that you're going on the opposite side of the spine thread from where your tail is, because that's going to make you able to get that nice tight knot. Then you drop the needle off, and you just pull it tight like that so that it's nice and tight along the spine. And you just tie it into a quick little double knot, assuming that you can do that. And you have a book. You can trim the tails to be about the length that you want them to be. Sometimes you can do embellishments on the tails, like little beads or other types of things on there. Sometimes with the embroidery floss, you'll leave it a little bit longer so that it frays nicely. But for this one, we'll leave it at about a ½ inch. Then you can go over with your bone folder again to make sure you have nice crisp corners. If things didn't line up quite right, you can trim it off with the rotary cutter, and you have a basic book. This project you can adapt to several different types of things. Like this one is a basic sort of little gift photo album that we did with the Craft Ninjas. You use some nice cover stock for, some vellum pages to protect the photos, and then black cardstock on the inside pages for the photos with little photo corners to hold them in. And you can see we used embroidery floss to bind this one. You can do mini books like toy books, which are actually 16-page books that are done with one sheet of paper that's folded and then cut to size. And these were some little pocket notebooks that we did that were pre-printed, and then we folded them together and sewed them. And then the last project is one that's a little fancier cover where this binding knot is actually trapped inside a folded cover that hides where the binding stitch is. So those are just some of the projects that you can do with the basic pamphlet stitch, but I'm sure there's many, many more that you could do for scrapbookers or memory bookers, things like that. So zinesters, get ready to take over the world, because this is the technology for you. Yay!